Alors, bonjour. I'm going to start in French just to do a small introduction because it's always a bit easier, and then we'll do the talk in English. Merci beaucoup d'être là, présent. Alors, je fais une petite présentation assez rapide en français parce que je sais que pour certains, c'est plus facile. Alors, mes invités aujourd'hui sont Francesca Bellini-Joseph, qui est une collectionneuse basée à Londres, mais qui est à l'origine et de Colombie, et qui a une activité qui va bien plus au-delà de juste avoir une collection. Elle est aussi patron, donc elle est mécène. Elle a quelques opérations de mécénat dans son portefeuille. Et puis, par ailleurs, elle est fondatrice d'un programme qui s'appelle ACT, qui est assez... Enfin, je voulais en parler parce que c'est assez original, peut-être pour un public français. Il s'agit d'une online tutoring, donc d'une opération online dans laquelle peuvent s'inscrire à la fois des collectionneurs, des artistes, des galeristes. Donc c'est vraiment une formation qui est basée sur la communication. Enfin, elle nous en parlera certainement un petit peu mieux vers la fin, juste pour entrer un petit peu dans des questions qui vont un petit peu au-delà de la collection. Et puis par ailleurs, Grégory Lang, qui nous arrive de Bruxelles, mais qui est aussi un petit peu parisien quand même. Ça fait 17 ans qu'il habite à Bruxelles, mais Grégory est français. Et donc Grégory est commissaire indépendant et aussi producteur. Nous allons parler aussi de cet aspect-là, du soutien aux artistes par le biais de la production et de la capacité à trouver du mécénat et de l'argent pour produire de l'art. Et puis par ailleurs, Grégory travaille aussi comme art advisor. Alors mon idée pour mes deux invités, c'est justement de parler évidemment d'une collection, peut-être d'une histoire d'une collection aussi, comment elle s'entame, quelle est l'histoire en particulier de Francesca qui est ici avec nous, qui est très intéressante, mais aussi parler d'autres façons de soutenir les artistes. C'est-à-dire que l'idée de collectionner, et les galeries parlent beaucoup là-dessus avec... les collectionneurs, c'est qu'acheter, c'est justement soutenir les artistes et soutenir la production et la créativité artistique. Mais il y a peut-être aussi d'autres façons pour les collectionneurs de soutenir les artistes, et c'est justement cette ouverture-là que nous allons donner au talk aujourd'hui. I'm going to skip to English, so I introduced you guys in a very succinct manner. And I will start now asking you questions. I talked about your project, about the online tutoring, that you may talk a little bit further on, and Grégory, you're bilingual, so you got everything I said. Please let me know if I said anything wrong.
Perfect.
Okay, good. So I'm going to start with you, Francesca. I hope these images are right. I want to start with your story a little bit because Francesca has something really interesting about her, is that she started studying to become an artist herself. So not only she has a passion for art, but it's kind of a passion from within, in the sense that you kind of are in touch with what it means to create, what it means to produce. Can you tell us a little bit about your beginnings? And also, what we're looking at is the first, in my experience doing talks, the first time I interviewed a collector and I've shown one of the collector's work. So this is actually Francesca's creation, your artwork.
Hello, everyone. First of all, sorry about my French. I'm studying a little bit, but I don't feel confident talking in French. So hopefully if I come back next year or in 2 years, I'll be able to do this in French.
Okay, I'll remember that.
Well, please don't. Yeah, so I'm Colombian. I lived in London. I have a house in the south of France, so there's an attachment to this country. And I studied fine arts a long time ago. And yes, I mean, my idea was to become an artist. After I graduated, I did a few shows, mostly institutional, only like 4 or 5, and then I was very concerned about my financial situation, because obviously, as you can imagine, institutional shows can be quite reputational, but they didn't bring anything else except that sort of confidence in the work. But anyway, then I started writing about art, and then I worked in galleries in collection management. I became a patron at Tate, part of the acquisition committee. I set up the group of patrons at the Fundación MAG, and so on and so forth. But what it means for me, or what I feel I am, in a way, is an artist, although I don't feel like I have the right to say that I'm an artist because I stopped a long time ago. But basically these works that I love and I find quite amusing that you like them too, because obviously I did them when I was in university, was during a time when I was doing a lot of exercises of these color scales, you know, when you go from black to white and you have to go in lighter darks and darker whites, so you can create the entire transition between the black and the white. So these sort of exercises you love or you hate, and in my case, I love them completely. So these works, as you can see, they are very austere, very economical, because they are only newspaper. And basically, I use the images. So the images are the very dark side, and the text is the very white side. And I was trying to sort of create these palettes as well. But in a way, they contain so much information because it's about the newspapers, and you can imagine a Colombian newspaper has a lot of information and a lot of content. So I just wanted to, I was very intrigued by the idea of drawing, or the idea of even painting to some extent, with the information contained in the work rather than on the surface. So I see them more as exercises rather than pieces, but I do like them, and I have them, all of them.
Does this, I love this idea of the information contained in the color and in the lines that you can see. And I'm going to go straight to our subject here. Of course, we're at Drawing Now Art Fair. And I was thinking that, you know, my relationship to drawing and the line and the exhibition that you see outside with the performance that Emmanuel Béranger did, for example, is that the line contains a lot of data, a lot of information. Is this for you where, you know, your interest with drawing started? Because I know that you have a particular penchant for drawing. Does this connect to drawing in some way or not?
Yes, for me, drawing is more like the soul of arts, if you think about it. But I'm very interested in the scarcity and in the material simplicity of drawing. So, for instance, looking at the results and the traces of the performances that you have as we come downstairs, that is sort of the drawing that appeals to me very much. More than, for instance, drawings that can be more representational or closer to painting, if you like. So yes, it's that idea of the information in the line. Sometimes it's information about the body, the movement, or just the trace, or the material. So that sort of scarcity is what I find interesting.
Speaking of information, so you told me that growing up in Colombia, and we kind of have a similar experience, or although I don't dare compare, but I'm Portuguese, so in some ways I do understand your experience of not experiencing these major artworks that we have in Paris, where you can go to the Louvre and, well, there's the Gioconda, or, you know, or all the artworks, Friedrich, or whatever you can think of, it's there, it's available for you. Perhaps if you don't live in Paris, if you live, you know, somewhere else, you can always go to Paris and France and see the artworks for real. But in Colombia, there was this notion that, you know, you saw artworks in a very specific way. So I'm thinking of someone who actually you're still in touch with and who is an artist now and that you support, and of this project in particular. So can you tell us a little bit about this drawing that is in your collection? So we're moving on to the idea of, you know, acquisition and having works by other artists living with you. So tell us a little bit about this project.
Yes, with pleasure. Do you have the image where you can see all the installation? Yeah. Well, I don't have it all. I just have a selection of drawings. But basically, when we were studying our BA, the only way we had to know about the history of art was through bad quality photocopies. So I went to the best.
Sorry, it was actually much worse than Portugal, actually, when you think about it. Because, yeah.
And I always say I went to the best university in Colombia, and nonetheless, we had to learn all the history of art through very bad quality photocopies, because these were the photocopies of the photocopy of the photocopy of the photocopy. And my friend Esteban, who was a semester above me, this series of 1,000 drawings where with dots, ink dots, he would reproduce the very bad quality photocopies that we used in school, in high school, in university. So if you go back to, for instance, this obviously very recognizable image, basically he did imagine the entire history of art, or like the iconic images, in a very precarious way. And this is the way that we were just learning everything. So this is a work that I love very much because it speaks about my education. Obviously, when I came to Europe, I was just like, wow, this is amazing. And in a way, this makes me also very upset today. I think we were talking about this. When we look at this idea of the local museum, this discussion about turning museums local, which is becoming very trendy, because for someone in Colombia or someone anywhere else that is not Europe, this is it's amazing to have access to all these things. It means a lot to us. Yeah, so I love this work.
That's really, yeah, I'd like to stay with that idea for a while, because I mean, you come from the context, an Anglo-Saxon context. You live in the UK, in London. And so what you're referencing is that, you know, and I'm interested in your activity as a patron as well. So you participate in these discussions in museums. And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because maybe the discussions here in France are not the same in acquisition committees, for example.
Okay, so basically, I think based on this idea of the environment and the carbon footprint, and there's a lot of discussions in art fairs as well as to, or in reference to shipping. At least in the UK, there's a whole discussion around how to stop, for instance, blockbuster exhibitions or very international exhibitions and make them more local, more for the local community. And this is all in the sake of environment. Now, I want to trust science to solve that problem, because I think there is a danger in Europe or the US thinking that museums are local or museums are for the local community. I think it's classist in a way, because we also want to enjoy these things. And many people make the effort to come and see these treasures and all these things, and it means a lot for education, for just understanding the world. So I hope that museums remain very much international.
I think that's also the consequence of patriarchal collections and very wide collections, where we're getting to a point where we understand so much that we haven't been representing our own communities and the diversity of your local community, that there's this sort of guilt of thinking, wait a minute, why am I going to Africa when we have a black, community here and with artists that are not represented in the collection? So by correcting, we are actually going in the other direction.
That's what I think, yeah.
Of now you have to take an airplane if you want to see art from, Australia. I mean, if we come to the extreme of what you're saying, it means that in some way it's classist because only wealthy people will be able to access other cultures. Yeah, which is food for thought. I just wanted to do this parenthesis because I thought it was interesting. And also, it also takes me to, not this one, but this one. It also takes me to another aspect of your collection, which is, I think, of course, again, not comparing your experience in Colombia, because I did grow up in Europe, but I always had this passion for conceptual art and for art that doesn't take a lot of space and yet radiates a lot. And this work in particular by an artist that actually was presented here at the fair by Galerie Martina Bucaya. It's a duo of Brazilian artists called Stani Kilain. and they and this is a horizon, right? And I was thinking, you know, that my love for conceptual art might come from the fact that it travels so well. You know, you travel with it in your head. You almost don't need to see it live, but this is also kind of landscapey in some ways, and it's kind of a landscape that is based on so little. Can you explain the work a little bit, and if you agree with what I was saying, because it might be
yes.
a different experience for you.
I love conceptual art. Although I have figuration and so on, I
We'll see some figuration as well.
yes. But everything that is text-based, photocopies, paper, line, I find it very, not only intimate, but very powerful because of how austere it is. So basically this is based on the Walden Horizon. It's a very important book in American literature. And what this duo does is to identify all the pages where the word horizon is, then they scan it, and then they mute all the text, and they just leave the sentence that includes the word horizon. And then all the piece is just a horizon of sentences.
They level the pages together.
Yes, yeah. So like all the pages are from the book, but they all include the word horizon. You can obviously exhibit it in any order. It doesn't really matter.
So you can make the very long sentence yourself, actually. You can
Yes,
rearrange
I
it
mean, you
yourself.
can decide how to create this sort of, I see it like a random poem as well.
And these artists, actually, they come from graphism.
Yes, actually, yes. One comes from editorial design, and the other one from semiotics. Yeah, they work a lot with text, which of course is a beautiful drawing in itself, no letters and symbols.
So with text, they do a lot of site-specific works also. So very brilliant. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of their work too.
Yeah.
This is embarrassing for me, but anyway, so yeah, this is another work of your collection, which is also a drawing, and I found it interesting.
It is embarrassing because he's her husband.
Guilty is charged. And so this is interesting in terms of drawing as well, because it is a drawing, and I know exactly where it is in your house, and there's a relationship with the visitor as you go in. Do you want to explain the work a little bit?
And it has suffered so much. So basically, I think this is probably my favorite piece, because it looks, for me, it's like the ultimate drawing. It looks very heavy, but it's just graphite on paper, so it's very, very fragile. But it looks like if it falls, it's going to kill you. And I don't know why people want to touch it.
Always. I'm presenting one in an exhibition now in Brussels, and we keep running after people. They want to touch it. That's the only piece people want to touch in the whole. There were 300 artworks.
I mean, I'm married to him. I kind of get it.
That was the only work that everyone wanted to touch.
Yes.
Because people are doubting, and they don't know what it is, and the vision doesn't help to solve and to understand what it is.
Yeah.
That's why they feel the need to touch it.
But I always think if it looks very heavy, don't touch it. It's going to kill you. If it looks very delicate, don't touch it. You're going to break it. So like I don't know why, but it has suffered a little bit, also from the wind, not only people. But also that idea of balance, because it's just standing there. And you know, we have the tube, moves the entire building, it shakes, so I'm always stressed about it, but it's surviving so far.
I think that's the point of it, probably.
So maybe you have also to explain in few words that it's of course it's graphite, but it's the way he produces. It's like almost like a performance.
It's very performatic, absolutely, yes. And if you go to the studio, he has also these beautiful different versions of graphite. That is powder, that is the typical pencil, but also the one that is like
the putty.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of a thing that you can mold into any shape. And
yes. Yeah.
These graphite tools were actually invented as a brand in Portugal called Viarco, and he worked with the person in the factory, and he contributed to create soluble graphite. So it really is I mean, I'm talking about this because it's a really amazing factory and they have absolutely everything. And they actually found out that the putty, which is a graphite putty that you can mold in with your hands, is actually really great for kids with autism, for example. So they're now doing lots of workshops with them in the north of Portugal and taking them to the whole country. So it's a really interesting endeavor. So yeah.
Sorry, can I just say one thing about the performatic aspect of it? Because in terms of paper, so he uses this very, I mean, obviously, you know. Do you remember how long it is? Because it's like a lot of paper involved in this piece.
In this particular one, I don't quite know.
But
I
it's
don't
like
know.
meter.
I'm the worst person to ask, actually. I don't think, but it's a long, yeah. Maybe
yes,
you know
but because the folding is also very important, and of course, folding is very important in performance. When you think about Simon Forti, or when you think to yes, American scene where the folding was a great part of the performance.
And one
with
of
Robert Morris,
a lot of his
instance.
works, the point is to fold the paper in a sense that you don't know where it was folded and where the paper finishes, and that's probably why you think it's a long piece of paper, because the idea is for it to be folded in a way that you don't know where it starts and where it ends. You don't see the end of it. We need to move a little to start moving along. So this is a different relationship with an artist, Noemi Perez, who's in Colombia, and she has an incredible story, and her drawings have an incredible story. But this in particular, so this is your home, and this in particular was a commission, right? So I'm really interested in that, because then we're going to kind of skip maybe to other ways of supporting artists and talk a little bit about that. So what came about in this? And we were talking about figuration. This is a figural kind of work. So can you tell us a little bit about it and what your relationship, because I'm sure you have a personal relationship with it, what it is?
Well, she's a very good friend of mine, and this is a drawing that is based on a series of drawings she's done much bigger than this. So this is only 1 meter tall. She does it 2 meters tall, but it's 5 meters long. So if you see, it has this sort of Torah-looking system that you can roll it and sort of move it. But I said to her, like, I want to display this. I don't want to have this on storage. So please do me one. So she did this one for me, but it's still from the same series. So it's basically she grew up in a very problematic area in Colombia, Catatumbo, which at the same time is a beautiful jungle, and obviously everything in Colombia is like that, no? That sort of contrast, very beautiful in terms of nature, environment, and then very dangerous. And you can see it from here, maybe in the close-up, but basically you see all this beautiful jungle-like landscape, and then you start identifying very small figures in the background. And these are the army, the guerrilla, the people that were displaced from the Catatumbo because of the violence. So you can see like all this, there's a story behind it. That you can see almost in a cinematographic way. And it goes with a diary that she writes herself about everything that happened in the Catatumbo. There was a lot of killings. It had to do also with petrol explorations and so.
And it was when she went back to, because she stayed away for 10 years, didn't she? And then she went back there because you wanted to forget about it, right?
Not only that, it could be very dangerous. And this is a very, because you can get killed or you can get kidnapped. And I think at present, this is a very topical, especially this part of Colombia, because as part of the peace treaty and so on, now the army is talking about all the innocent people they killed in this region to say that they were killing guerrilla people. So it's sort of a very topical thing, but it's coming from her because she comes from there. So, yeah. And you exhibited the diary, so you know more about it.
Yes, in the exhibition that we curated, during the one of the lockdowns, in between lockdowns, called Drawing Power, Children of Compost. And one of the works that we exhibited were indeed the notebooks. And the notebooks are a kind of diary whereby she not only writes, but she also draws and does these beautiful watercolors that are, the contrast is the same between the landscape and the history, where the drawings are the most precious, beautiful colors and shapes. And then you have a lot of red sometimes, you have blood, and you have these impressions that she writes about her own land, which they're really moving. So you have more details here. And this is already Grégory. So of course, after a little conversation with you, I'd like to kind of go into other ways of supporting artists, but I'm really curious about your idea of collecting, because you don't collect in a sort of compulsive way. You have quite an original relationship to buying work and living with it, or having it in storage. I'm curious to know, because I think that kind of sparked your idea of supporting artists in another way. So could you talk a little bit about the residencies that you supported and what prompted that thinking and that strategy?
Well, I think first I have a personal relationship with many of these artists, because they were either my teachers or they were my peers. So obviously it goes beyond the object or owning something. And then if you combine that with my absolute fear of owning too much in general, and sometimes I think it's about being a millennial. Like, I don't want to find myself in a situation where I own too many things. So for instance, what I'm trying to do now, and he's not here, is to try and support more ephemeral projects. So this summer we are doing sort of garden that is going to disappear. So I think that is another way of collecting, which is also performatic. And then you don't have like an object, but you have like a moment that then you can repeat. Sorry, your question was?
The idea I mean, I think you've replied really well, in the sense that what you're saying is that, and I always think of that, and we're talking about the show, the works exhibited in Hyperdrawing, the exhibition I curated, where we show other ways of creating that are not ownable in some ways,
yes.
but that the artists need to do, and they're creative processes that exist for an audience, but it doesn't mean that you own them, or maybe you can't, but there's a way to support artists to do these kinds of projects,
No,
and
absolutely.
the garden is a really perfect
Yes,
example.
and you
of
asked
that.
me about the residencies. Yes, and then supporting residencies or supporting like different things that are not only the work, but I don't have answers, because I see that many people still have to use storages and so on. I hope, well, it is happening to me too, but it's something that I want, but not because of quantities, because of scale. So for instance, we have a few works that are huge and we can't display them. Yes, but for me it's very problematic, and it's something that is always in my head. But again, because I feel that I am an artist, I don't feel so pressure about the object, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, moving on to Grégory, I would like to kind of shift the perspective a little bit.
Okay, I will try to make maybe a link in the way I...
You interview yourself, that's amazing. I didn't have
Yes,
to ask
in the
questions.
way I also collect some works and some drawings. And the drawings, I didn't give you any image of them, but again, today by walking on the fair, it makes me think that I usually, when I see drawings, I always feel that it is the closest, you feel the closest aspect of, it's the closest way to be, to understand the artist. It's the best way to approach. And I usually collect works if I know the artist. And some drawings makes me want to meet the artist. It's what happened today. I saw a few interesting works, and I really want to meet the artist. I was very touched by seeing Eric Dittmann's drawing. I met him at the time, but I saw, yes, drawings of artists I always want to be close from. I have some drawing, for instance, from a project that was prepared with Vito Acconci, but for me it was very important to keep this drawing. The project was a wallpaper, but I kept the preparation drawing, for instance.
Maybe that's a good transition to what we're looking at, because you have a very, you enjoy having a relationship with the artist, from what you just said, in terms of understanding the creative process. So you became a producer recently, and we're looking at a storyboard.
A storyboard. But just before that, I will just explain another thing that
becoming very hard to interview.
Yes.
Grégory.
I got forward, but also to connect with you. I'm first a curator, and it's true that I usually support mainly very drawings that are very conceptual and very minimal, and the work that happen to produce are not necessarily that minimal. So there's a very the drawing you could see in many of the exhibition I'm curating are always minimalists, and the artists I'm following when I offer them to help to support their project, especially when I really love the universe, and when I know it's something I will not go to see right away. I want to know more, and I'm super happy to support and give attention and go along with them. And sometimes it's not necessarily the aesthetic I will necessarily support in my many exhibitions. And it's really about curiosity, and because I'm taken by their project, and I tell them, okay, let's make it possible. That's the way I work.
So tell me a little bit about this project in particular.
This is a project by two. It's an artist duo, like the Botanical Lane you were showing before.
And they're actually represented by LMNO Gallery, who
on the fair
that has a booth in the process section.
And the name is De Nicolai and Provost. There are two, Simona De Nicolai and Ivo Provost. They are based in Brussels. And actually, they came to me because they started a project, and what you see is a series of drawing. And they were working on a project since already a few years, and they didn't know how to produce it. They were in need to connect with museums and big institutions to be able to apply for grants and for subsidies. And actually, they started this project called Hello, Are We in the Show? No, that's not it. Yes, it's a series of drawing that was inspired by tapestry, that tapestry from the Hunt of Maximilian. That is, there's a whole room about it in the Louvre, and this hunt happens in the Forêt de Soignes. This is a forest next to Brussels. And they were very intrigued by the behavior of animals close from the humans, and they were very, totally passionate by the behavior of animals. Sometimes some birds, when they hear a plane, they bump into a tree, or squirrels go to the garbage to eat. So they started to observe, and they did amazing series of, let's say maybe 200 or more than 200 drawings. And exactly, this is the image scenario of the project, and the idea was to do a cartoon, and at the
an animation.
An animation, yes, an animation with all these drawings, and I offer them to think about the economy of the project, and offer them to find someone or an institution who could acquire the ensemble of the drawing. And also offer them to create an edition that exists also as you have a screen saver, you have a little slideshow and different elements. That is an edition apart that they could sell to become also their co-producer of their own project. And at the time...
so this supported the project financially, because
yes.
You could sell
exactly.
that in order to make the animation.
Exactly. And
So
finally,
you came up with that. Sorry to interrupt, but I
Yeah,
was
sure.
just interested because you came up with strategies
yes,
for them to be able to produce the work they wanted to make
totally.
by having them produce works that would sustain the project.
You said it perfectly.
Okay, right.
Thank you. And from there, they start to get some subsidies from the Flemish government and from the WAF, and all this drawing you see. So this is a part actually of the. It's called Constellation, the little edition we made with a slideshow. We presented at Loop, for instance, and on different places.
Loop Art
Art
Fair,
Fair.
which is an art fair dedicated to
f-
video
to
art
video.
in
And
Barcelona.
exactly, and there were some slides of this series of drawing, and actually maybe you should stop on that one for a while. And actually, I managed to sell the 170 drawings of the final film to the Friends of the SMAC museum in Ghent, and organize for the first time. The museum never did that before, to organize an evening with patrons and collectors to support the film. So they also sold the leftover, the films were not in the that are not part of the film, and slowly we pre-sell the film to the museum, and we get some support by the Musée de la Chasse et de la Nature here in Paris and Musée BPS in Charleroi, and since they have a gallery, LMNO, and we finally produced the film with tax shelters, with many supports. It's a huge budget. And
So
it's
were
a 12-minute.
you the one to gather all the museums? Did you contact the museums?
Yes.
You made all this kind of network
Exactly.
around them in order for them to produce.
To produce
these-
and to purchase money, private and public, together. And the film now exists. It has been shown once as a huge installation in the SMAC in Ghent during the pandemic in January or February
Do we have
last year.
images?
No, but the next one is this one. Yes, you can see the swan you just saw before, and the constellation was just showing. The edition was showing how from a drawing you go to an animation, and also with this tapestry and the whole origin of the project. And it became a film, and now it's a film that can be shown and can be displayed, and the artists through the gallery still sell some drawings. And the gallery since did another edition, another project with some stills from the project. I think you have some image of it if you pass through. No, they're not. They're in total disorder. That was a constellation, a projection, and now. Yes, and then the gallery is selling this edition also around the project. So, for me, each time it's a human adventure, but it starts really from a drawing. It's what I like.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is a really original process of, because we were talking this morning about the relationship between contemporary art and comics, and how you sell thousands of books of comics, but then an artist is going to sell one drawing, and it's going to be equivalent in some way. So the market is really complicated when you want to do an animation or you want to do an installation and video that is so expensive in terms of the economy that we were talking about, the austere minimalists drawings that we look at that sometimes are just made with a bit of paper and some graphite. So here we move on to a completely different economy that starts from a drawing but then ends up being a really complex economy. So how did, for the artists, like what was your role exactly? Did you tell them about this economy? Or
yes, and to help them in the art world. When we found a co-producer, we helped them more in the numeric world, and who could also help in Belgium with tax shelters and with different banks like Belfius. Because people can spare some tax supporting films, and now they open it to artist projects in Belgium. So it was very supportive too.
So tell me a little bit about the role of the producer, because that is something that we don't talk about in contemporary art, isn't it?
No,
There's a curator.
It's true. Usually you don't see much, but and I like it. It's working from behind and to make it possible and to connect actually. the artists with different operators and to diffuse. Yes.
I have one question. Do you think that sort of replaces the gallery?
Not at all. Actually, in this case, I worked with artists. Actually, when I met them, they had a gallery, West Gallery in Den Haag, was supportive at the beginning, and I worked with them at the time they had no gallery, and before they had a new gallery. I usually work with artists on a temporality that is complicated for some galleries. Many galleries need works for the next show, between they need works for the fair, but all the long-term projects that are between, if there's not a big institution behind, or if the gallery, if you're not a major gallery and you can invest a lot of money in the production for the project that will appear maybe in 2 or 3 years, it's very difficult for the artist. And this intermediary, I mean, all this zone is kind of difficult for artists to make it happen. And they really need support, and the sale of the drawing totally supported the artists in the process.
So maybe we can talk about another project that
Yes.
we've been skipping images, and you can see the conceptual exhibitions that you do. But I was interested in talking about Pierre-Jean Gilou.
Yes.
He's a French.
He's a French artist who came to me with a project he wanted to do that was about Japan. I'm a big fan of Japan. And I said, yes, I'm going to produce this work. I would be able to go to Japan. And that's a good opportunity. It happens that I supported this project during 7 years, and I didn't have time to go to Japan. I bought a camera, I support the artist financially also. And since I didn't go to Japan, the artist went there in residency many times, also at the Villa Kujoyama in Kyoto. He also was guested by different museum there. It's the final project had been shown in the main museum in Japan. But it started from some drawings he showed me after first travel there, and he was totally he's crazy. He was crazy about Japan at the time. He's still, but he was very interested in metabolism. Metabolism is this last utopic movement from that concerned mainly architecture after the war, after Hiroshima, and when architects started to build. Decided to build housing, to imagine to build housing because they didn't build much, inspired by DNA and by nature. It totally influenced all architecture, and actually it's not there, but I can show you and pass it to you. It started from a very small drawing. Can you hold it for me? It started from a very small drawing that is in the collection of Pompidou. It's Helix structure. It's too tiny, and from there the artist totally invented a world because he thought, oh, this imaginary architecture could be built and and he wanted to create to make sure that we could experiment it, to experiment a future that never happened. And I'm gonna show you what it became. This small sculpture became it became this kind of structure, and the film you can really go through the architecture, and you can be in Japan and go through the architecture. Yes, exactly. So we made a whole book about that. I co-produced too with different with 02 edition, the publishers, and we had the help there from the Centre National du Cinéma. We finally had the DICRAM. We finally had the help of the also Flemish from the Flemish part, from the French part, Centre Wallonie-Bruxelles, Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles in Belgium, from a banker, amazing collector from Geneva who supported the project. And different patrons and people I met at dinners, sometimes giving 500 euros, buying a drawing, supporting for the publication, or step by step, we finally made this project. It took us 5 or 6 years, and it's a fabulous project titled Invisible Cities. And the artist always started from drawings and tried to
what
imagine.
Does it become? Is it a video projection, an installation?
It's an installation with films, and you can't tell anymore what's. Yes, so that's a maquette. a drawing that became a maquette, and next step it became like a smart city on the like Biwa near Kyoto. You could visit. So and he worked with architects. Yes, this kind of drawings were the project. But at the end, it's films, it's installation. This is a video still. It started with a film, so half of what you see doesn't exist in real life. So it's totally invented, and it's called like augmented reality because you can't see what's developed in 3D animation and what's real. So he's playing with that.
That's incredible. And so where does the drawing stop and the is this still considered for the artist? Where is drawing in the final project?
The drawing is really the source.
The source material, right?
Yes. Is taking image, is going on site, is drawing, and after it's taking many images as footage, and from there, from his drawing, he start to create the work. So when he arrives in a city, in a place, he has a vague idea, but he doesn't know exactly what he'll do. So he's inspired by the drawing and the image he did.
And it took on from a sort of utopian drawing that it all started from a utopian small drawing in the Pompidou collection, basically.
Yes, this project, exactly.
Sorry, Francesca, you want to say?
No, that I was thinking, don't you think it's a little bit unfair that the drawing stops when it becomes some, because like
I understand.
architecture is one of those
Yes.
Permanent experiences or moments where we see drawing, right? Like you see the buildings or the bridges, and they are intrinsic drawings, no? So I see this, and for me the drawing continues, if that makes sense.
Yes, it makes sense. But at the end, the final presentation is a film, for sure. It's a metamorphosis.
Is that the drawing is the utopian architecture.
Yes.
You know, it's in there, obviously.
And you could do just a show with the drawings, and you will get it already.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, exactly. Just very quickly, because we're going very far. So going back to, I don't know why these images are scattered like this. Anyway, so you're also a curator, and you have worked with Irène Laub, who's a gallery that we've had continuously here at the fair since a few years back. Do you want to tell us a little bit about the relationship that a curator has with a gallery, for example? I mean, you know, forgetting drawing for a moment, but how does a curator, what does it mean, and how is it different for a curator to work with a gallery as opposed to do an exhibition at a museum like you've just opened at the CAB Foundation in
Saint-Paul de Vence.
Saint-Paul de Vence, yes, exactly, where you curated the show by Jan Veronica Janssens.
No, it's a show with the works from the collection in dialogue with Anne Veronica Janssens.
Yes, exactly. Apologies.
No problem.
But so, what is the difference when you work with a commercial gallery?
For me, I go along with people. So people contact me either for, it can be an artist who wants to develop a project. It can be a collector who wants to develop a collection or make an exhibition or develop an aspect of the collection. And when a gallery asks me to either to create a show with some artists of the gallery, or I usually offer to add other artists, not only the artists of the gallery, to have them to make sure they can discover also and have the opportunity to show other works. And it's a way it started with Irène Laub. I did a show that was titled Slice and Dice with some artists of the gallery. She wanted to have a distance and a regard on the work of 3 artists of the gallery, and offer to invite also and to have works from Nazgul Ansarinia, an artist from Iran, and Dan Graham, and other artists in dialogue with the artists of the gallery. And in this show, I did present, for instance, a work by José Pedro Croft, and she wanted to start to work with him. So it was a process. So I was a support also to connect with some artists.
Yeah, for me that was important to mention, because it is this idea of supporting artists in different ways is also to establish new relationships with galleries and to support the relationships, because your question was about like the producer replacing galleries, but I think there's a space for everyone in some ways, and sometimes we forget that galleries also need support in order to kind of know how to deal with the new artist or the artist's universe, how they create, how they
I was in Lisbon this week at the opening of Melik Onya at Christina Guerra, but he was one of the artists I invited in a show I curated there. I had a carte blanche with the artists of the gallery, and I guessed other artists, and at the end she wanted to work with two of them to do a project with some of them. So it creates opportunity. That's also why I'm doing this kind of exhibition in galleries. And here's this José Pedro Croft. It's a series of show with 3 artists from Portugal and working with the gallery. And then I did this. I went to the artist studio and we selected the works together with the artists, with the gallerists, and helped to set up the show in the gallery. This is a work. It's really about drawing and performance. I was talking before about work playing with space and folding. But this artist is also very influenced, by the way, by Robert Morris and Simon Forti. His work is also about interstice and space between, about hiding. We could talk also about with performance, about Rauschenberg and Cunningham, for instance. There is this connection with this playing, overlapping, and hiding, and he's playing just lines. He's playing with José Pedro Croft. He's playing with space. Maybe people will get dizzy to go from one different image to another one, but it's many lines, and he's going out of the paper. It's work on paper, and he's using different materials with ink,
varnish.
Yes, varnish and different elements.
Etching.
And it's beautiful because it's so many layers.
It's a physical experience
It's
to see his work, because he
very
also
physical
works with
experience.
sculpture as well.
But
He
his
works
sculpture
with
are also
elements in
his drawing and his are sculptures, and his sculptures are drawings. So
absolutely, yeah.
I like this work because it's really is at the limits between the it's a 3-dimensional aspect, but always very thin. There is no it's a 3-dimensional work c'est un espace plan, and the paper is an espace plan, but it's never a volume, and I really like this work.
Very intriguing.
Yes,
when you
always.
have pieces where you can't easily answer, is this sculpture, is this drawing, is this
and
painting?
I love that. I love this ambiguity.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, me too.
Well, thank you very much. This was really, really compelling and interesting. I wonder if there's questions, if someone has any questions for Francesca or Grégory. I have a mic in my hand, so please don't hesitate. Come on. I know it's very hot today, but I'm sure I can't be the only one asking questions for sure. Do you have questions for each other?
Yes, maybe I have questions. I'm going to help you. No, I would like to know when, and push further this idea you had, that you said that more and more you want to support moments, and I mean artists who are creating moments and more ephemeral works. How do you expect the artist to show you the project? It can be a text, or there's a display, or sometimes there's a drawing, or what does the artist show you in general?
It's a good question. I think so far it's based on something that has already happened, and normally this happens in institutional environments, in museums or biennials, because it's where you actually, as an artist, you can develop these projects. So we are sort of telling the artist, so like for instance, we just acquire one of these works, which was basically acquiring, I don't know, like the right of staging. It's a little bit like a performance, I imagine. But like we know how it looks like because it was already exhibited many years ago in a museum. And there's another one that we want to sort of acquire or produce to use the same terms, which was also exhibited. It was another garden. It was exhibited at a biennial, so it sort of exists already. But then you have another complication with that, because for me, it was about not thinking about the object and the storage and everything. But then it becomes quite complex with the artist to talk about these things, and it becomes like a whole process. So I was thinking, it's not for everybody, because it requires a lot of patience and managing and conversations. And sometimes I was telling you this, like sometimes I just feel that I see people that just buy something, and I sort of admire that too, because it's like they are free, you know, like free of so many questions and so many conversations. So, yeah.
Maybe you can do a mix of both in the future.
Probably.
I think this mix is very interesting, but as a collector at different levels, you can support an artist in his projects. That's what is important, maybe to rediscuss. Sometime I know more and more collector who consider that at some point buying it, that they support the system. They participate to the economy and make it possible. They don't necessarily show it or have it on their wall. They want to support a process. They want to support an intention of someone. And during the pandemic, it has been very important. Many collectors were in contact with artists and buying a small work or supporting, buying a drawing, buying something, just to support their the practice. And it's more. Yes, it's maybe more easy for an artist to sell a drawing, and than the.
And it's easier to collect an object or a
Something
painting
tangible,
or something
yeah.
tangible, for sure.
But I think it's funny because in our conversation, drawing has kind of become the currency of these ephemeral projects. Like, you know, you have a project or a performance, and then suddenly the drawing is a sort of token that you have as a collector, where, you know, it's easier to live with it, and at the same time you're supporting a bigger, more complex project that you don't want to take to the mainstream or to cinema, as it were, for example, in your case, but you want to keep it in the museum. So the collector plays a really incredible role in relation to the drawing, so that the other work that emanates from the drawing can exist on the biggest and wider scale.
And look at artists who did produce their own works. For instance, like Christo. I mean, he created a whole economy by doing his drawings and paint on his photograph and sell the drawings mainly to support the product.
But I think it's more than a drawing, it's prints that can be drawings as well. But I think it's getting out of control. The producing prints to...
There's NFTs now, so you can move on to...
They are dying, I think.
Yeah, I think so too, but, you know, who knows?
But
yeah, I mean, prints are kind of like these editions, but that's also something that you use like in you know, non-profit spaces and things like that.
No, that's fine. No, yes, I mean, you use them for different reasons, but I feel that it's becoming too much when, for instance, you want to do like charity moments or when you want to support like a work, and or what I'm recommending the institutions that I support or the artists that I support is like, I just prefer to help you. Don't give me the prints, because like it just gives me things, and then I'm just collecting a lot of things that probably I won't display, and you feel trapped. I feel trapped by this, because for instance, during the pandemic, the museums, the residencies, the artists, everybody was doing a print. And so you are in this situation where you just get emails like, buy me a print, buy me a print, buy me a print. Like, I don't want prints. No.
You prefer to support a project
At some point I said, like, take this, don't give me a print. Like in the future, if I want to have one of your works, if you give me like, I don't know, a discount, it would be better, but at least I have a piece that I really want to have, not something. And I feel a lot of, well, I wouldn't say a lot of, but some people felt like that too. That said, there are prints that are meant to be prints.
Yeah, exactly. You're
See?
saying that the artist is creating something in order to kind of have a sort of support, but it's not the real work that the artist is doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's why you need producers, right? To create things that make sense in some ways and in regards to the work
No, I
of the
think
artist.
it's a beautiful media. I love prints and they are very close to drawing. But it needs to make sense to
Yeah, in
to be
regards to
like-
the work
yeah.
of
Yes,
the
yes.
artist, they need to produce that particular kind of work. Thank you so much. This has been quite long,
Sorry.
but very, very nice, because you have so much to say and we could stay here for a long, long time. You are very original, both of you, in the way you kind of deal with artists and support creativity. So thank you very much.
No, thank you very much for coming and you for
Thank you,
inviting
Jana.
us and you for coming too.
This has been very, very pleasurable. Thank you so much. And thank you.
Thanks you.